Hi guys, welcome back to a Sacred Vedic Astrology. My name is Samantha and I'm so blessed and truly so grateful to be a professional Vedic Sidereal astrologer. Today, I'm actually going to do a video that has been requested by one of you guys, and we're going to go into the differences between Western tropical astrology and Vedic sidereal astrology because they are two vastly different systems of astrology. So, I want to preface this video by saying that I have studied both systems of astrology. So I started really studying Western astrology when I was about 12 years old. I think I was 12, maybe turning 13. And I just found my astrology chart for whatever reason. And I would research all my placements. I would look up Moon in Aquarius in the 8th house. What does it mean? I was really interested in all the sort of esoteric things when I was younger, right? It just felt like home to me. Like, to me, anything that's spiritual, anything that's metaphysical, anything astrological, anything connected to numerology feels like home. That's the only way I know how to explain it. And even when I was much younger, I would go to the school library and I would sift through all the books and I would just go to the section on witchcraft. And I was like really young. And I would just go to the books. I would pull out the books on witchcraft, I would open them, and I'd be like, oh yeah, like I remember this. And I would obsessively research astrology, numerology. It just felt like home to me. It felt very familiar. I'm one of those people where I have a remembrance of my past lives in this lifetime, which I'll get into as we get more into the story of also how I shifted from Western astrology to Vedic astrology and how that happened. Because I fully believe I did Vedic astrology in past lives, because I used to see these like images of charts and I'd be like, oh, this is real astrology, and turns out it was Vedic astrology. We'll get into that as we're going into the video. So I have studied both systems of astrology, Western tropical astrology, most of my early. I had all the books, I'd watch all the videos, I would do all my friends' astrology charts, I would be at parties, I'd pull up people's charts and I would read them for everyone. Like I was that person my whole entire life. But I never did Western astrology professionally because I didn't feel like there was enough merit to it, in the sense that I didn't feel like I could predict someone's life story. I didn't feel like I could predict that accurate of how has someone's life unfolded and what are they meant to do in this lifetime and what is their career and what is their dharma and what is their purpose. I felt like Western astrology was really fun. It was fun to cast someone's horoscope and look at their moon sign and look at what houses different placements occupied. But I didn't really feel this deep sense of profound connection to someone's true life story through Western astrology. I thought it was fun. I thought it was interesting. I had a lot of moments of self-discovery and self-acceptance through Western astrology, like having an 8th house moon. That's a huge part of who I am. Like I am the energy of moon in the 8th house. I've always been interested in all of the 8th house themes. My life has been very 8th house, very up and down, very intense. I've gone through a lot of intense experiences in this lifetime, best believe it. So when I found out about the moon in the 8th house, I was like, this is my whole life story summarized in one astrological placement. So I loved Western astrology for that aspect. It was very focused on our psyche and our psychology and our personality. And that's one huge aspect of Western astrology, right? So as we start to break down the differences between Western tropical astrology, Vedic sidereal astrology, I want to emphasize the point that we have to understand the cultural differences of where these two systems of astrology are stemming from. All right. So to understand Western tropical astrology, we have to understand the Western world that we live in, okay? The Western world is very much focused on psychology and personality, and the Western world has a huge interest in the psyche and the mind and why we are the way that we are from a more psychological sort of lens. That's a huge aspect of Western culture and Western society. So that's also a huge aspect of Western astrology. There's a sense of wanting to get this snapshot or this profile of someone's psyche, who they are, what is their psychology like, what is their personality like. That is a huge basis of Western astrology, because that's a huge basis of the Western world and the Western culture that most of us live in, right? So that's a huge aspect of Western astrology, is who are we? What's our psychology? How is our personality reflecting in this day-to-day world? Because it's that Western viewpoint. So a lot of times the Western world will not so much focus on like our karma and our past life karmas and things that are maybe more predetermined. The Western world has this huge belief in free will, which, yes, of course, I have a huge belief in free will as well too, which we'll get to, but the Western world is a lot more going in that direction, right? Psychology, personality, how we have come into our personalities based on our upbringing and our nurturing. That's a lot of the Western psyche, the Western world. It's a lot more psychological of a lens and a lot more psychological of a viewpoint in how we're looking at the astrology from the West, okay? Now, let's think about the Eastern perspective when we're looking at Vedic astrology. The Eastern philosophy, the Eastern perspective is very focused on karma. Who have we been in our past lives, and why did we come here to reincarnate? What are we here to work out? What are we here to work through karmically? That's a huge, important viewpoint of the Eastern world. The Eastern world and the Eastern perspective is also very focused on this more sort of predetermined sense of destiny, right? A lot of Eastern philosophy believes that a lot of things that are happening to us in this current lifetime, this current incarnation, is stemming from a previous lifetime, a previous incarnation, a previous karma. So for example, I'm just throwing out an example. A Eastern sort of thought form would be, okay, we're poor in this lifetime. Maybe it's because in past lives, we misused our money. Okay, random example, but that's more the Eastern thought. The Western thought would be, someone's poor in this lifetime. Maybe it comes from their upbringing. Maybe it comes, there's more of that psychological lens of the West, the more karma-based lens of the East. All right, so this is really important when we're differentiating Western astrology versus Vedic astrology. Very, very important. Probably one of the most important aspects of understanding the differences between the systems, all right? Different philosophical viewpoints, okay? So Vedic astrology has a little bit more of a predetermined understanding of astrology. Western astrology is more so about what's our personality, what's our psychology, how are we showing up in our day-to-day world, what's our energy like. For example, they'll talk about the sun, the moon, the rising, the big three. And the Western psychological lens is what's someone's personality like. That's what they're trying to get to more so in Western astrology most of the time. I don't want to generalize because I know there's a lot of different Western astrologers. There's Hellenistic astrology, which I have a lot of respect for Hellenistic astrology. It's just not my personal form of astrology, but I know that there's some really amazing Hellenistic astrologers as well too. So I don't want to generalize, but a lot of times Western astrology is more so focused on our personality and our psychology and our psyche and how we're showing up in this world from that perspective. The Eastern perspective, again, I don't want to generalize because a lot of us modern Vedic astrologers are taking a lot more free will into our practice, but a lot of Vedic astrologers believe that most things are from karma, they're from past lives. There's more of a predetermined sense about it, which we have to understand the culture that Vedic astrology is coming from. Okay, Vedic astrology is coming from India, of course. India was really in these caste systems, at the time that Vedic astrology was coming up, at the time that, many Vedic astrologers were doing their practice, there wasn't so much a sense of free will because there is this separation into different caste systems, right? So if we think about the Western world, we think about we have all this free will, we have an ability to build this American dream, right? And then we think about the culture that Vedic astrology is coming from. And India back in the day really did have this predetermined sense of fate due to the caste system that existed at the time. All right, it's really important to understand that. It's not like Vedic astrology has this predetermined fate about it just because that's what they wanted it to be. It's because that is the system that their society was existing in, right? It was hard for people to always rise out of their caste systems back in the day, so they would be placed into this more predetermined sense of fate, all right? Because they couldn't always make all the money, because they would be stuck in certain circumstances based on their family, based on their lineage. There was various sort of binding aspects of who people could be based on the caste system that Vedic astrology is stemming from. Really, really important to understand that, okay? So that's the Western world. There's all this free will, there's all this American dream, we can do whatever we want to do, right? Then we have the culture and the system that Vedic astrology is coming from, and they are dealing with a lot different circumstantial experiences. They can't always build the life they want to build because of the caste system that was existing at this time period. It's really important to understand that. All right, so this is a huge factor in everything, right? Western astrology is more towards do whatever you want, build the life you want, create whatever, the American dream, woo, right? Vedic astrology is coming from a place where they're more so focused on some more predetermined aspects of their fate or their destiny due to circumstances, all right? So that's a huge difference between the two systems of astrology, is the culture that they are stemming from, all right? Another important aspect of Vedic astrology is a lot of Vedic astrologers from India would grow up in these lineages of Vedic astrologers. So they would become Vedic astrologers because their uncle was a Vedic astrologer, their dad was a Vedic astrologer. It was very much in the lineage in India, and it was very protected and sacred. So a lot of Vedic principles, a lot of aspects of Vedic astrology didn't make its way into the West until Western astrologers would go to India, and they would have to train under these Vedic astrologers in India and bring back the knowledge. So if we think about Vedic astrology back in the day, they weren't researching online, what does this placement mean? A lot of Vedic astrological knowledge comes from these lineages and these families in India that would just pass on the knowledge down to the next person and the next person, right? So a lot of it's very sacred. A lot of it is word of mouth. They say that Vedic astrology used to be practiced while sitting under a tree, and that's how the Vedic astrological knowledge would come out, actually. They would sit under a tree to perform that system of astrology. And a lot of it comes from the lineage of those in India, right? For example, one of my amazing teachers, James Braha, went to India when he was younger back in the day, and he studied with all the astrologers of India, and he took the knowledge and brought it back to the West. So Vedic astrology also has this aspect of it that is very protected, it's very sacred, it gets passed down from generation to generation, it's in the lineage, it's in their family history. There's also that aspect of Vedic astrology that is huge for us to understand. All right, so it's less of this just put something into a box and make up some weird statement that I find a lot in Western astrology. Oh, someone's a Leo, that means this. Vedic astrology is really focused on what are actually the techniques that have been used for decades, what's been passed down. There's a difference in the system in that regard as well too. Okay, so that's another really important aspect. To gain the knowledge of Vedic astrology, people from the West had to go travel to India, get the knowledge from the gurus, and then bring it back to the Western world. That is how that astrological wisdom would come into the Western world. All right, So now, another really important aspect of Vedic astrology versus Western astrology. Vedic astrology is a form of astrology that is focused on dharma, karma, and prediction. Okay, so again, Western astrology is very focused on our energy, our psychology, our personality. How can we embody who we are in this lifetime, work with it? Vedic astrology is more so focused on how can we unravel our karmas in this lifetime? How can we reach our full potential to reach our dharma, which just means righteous path? And how can we get out of this cycle of reincarnation, essentially, right? So not every Vedic astrologer is going to have that perspective, but that is more so the Eastern perspective of astrology, is like, how do we unravel our karmas? How do we understand our karmas? And how do we get out of it so we're not repeating the same cycle in lifetime and lifetime again, right? Which we can see through like Rahu or Ketu, which we can see through the karmic axis point of the chart, right? We can understand some of these astrological karmas that we have come here with. So we're trying to unravel ourselves from our karma. We're trying to get out of this cycle of doing the same thing over and over again, lifetime to lifetime, right? And that's a very personal philosophical viewpoint. Not everyone is going to believe in reincarnation. Not everyone is going to believe in past lives. I happen to be an astrologer who really does believe in past lives, which I don't bring up in readings, by the way. I don't tell people who they were in a past life. That's not what I'm doing. But I do see the importance of reincarnation astrologically in the sense that our chart is showing us why we are here and what we're here to unravel and work through karmically, which is stemming from some sort of past life experience. All right. So I happen to believe very strongly in reincarnation. I've always seen my past life since I was younger. I would see these like Egyptian symbols in my mind, really strange stuff, but I'm just one of those people who has like a remembrance of my past lives. So I believe in it because I've felt it and I've seen it and I've experienced it. So a lot of Vedic astrology is stemming from a place of what are the past karmas and how can we work through those in this lifetime so we don't have to repeat this cycle over and over again. That's a huge aspect of Vedic astrology. All right, and the other aspect is the predictive aspect. So Vedic astrology has and always will be the system that's known as the predictive system of astrology. So Vedic astrologers have and always will be very interested in prediction. A lot of Western astrologers will say things like, I don't predict, I don't want to predict, astrology isn't a tool of prediction. And then you'll find a lot of Vedic astrologers, many of them, again, I don't want to generalize, not all of them, many Vedic astrologers will be interested in prediction because Vedic astrology happens to be a system of astrology that lends itself towards prediction. We have the Dasha system, we have the Dasha sequences. We have so much that is built into the system that is meant to be used for prediction. If you're a Vedic astrologer, you're going to know that you've seen so many predictive aspects of your astrological practice because the system of astrology just lends itself to prediction. That is just a huge aspect of Vedic astrology that Western astrology can't. It's not that it can't go there. It's more so maybe that it's less focused and the system itself doesn't allow itself for as much like life prediction, future prediction as Vedic astrology does. And that's just been my own personal experience of knowing and studying both systems. All right, Western astrology, again, it's great for the psychology, it's great for the personality. You can get a really accurate psychological analysis on someone through Western astrology. You're like this, your energy is like this. It's going to be really accurate. But if you want to get someone's true karma, their true dharma, their true soul essence, their life story, and actually prediction of their life story, you want to go towards Vedic astrology. As someone who has studied both systems, Vedic astrology is giving us this really in-depth picture of someone's past, their present, and their future. All right, so we don't have as much of that ability in Western astrology because so much of the information got lost over time. So essentially what is said to have happened is there used to be a larger amount of information in Western astrology, but during the burning of Alexandria in ancient Egypt, they actually lost like all this information that they used to have on Western astrology. So there should be more information that exists within modern Western astrology, but it's missing because it got lost in that burning of Alexandria. All right, so because Vedic astrology has been such an oral tradition and Vedic astrology has been passed down, it's been so protected and it's been so sacred, Vedic astrology has been protected over the years, right? So they didn't lose all that information, it's been preserved. So Vedic astrology has this vast amount of knowledge, an endless amount of knowledge that Western astrology just does not have due to the loss of that information over time. All right, so quite literally, we have more information we can access, more predictive tools we can access in Vedic astrology, just so much more information we can access through the system of Vedic astrology. It's like an endless study with Vedic astrology, which I know is true for all forms of astrology, but especially Vedic astrology. It is an endless study. There's Gemini astrology, there's different branches within Vedic astrology. There's so many different techniques, there's so many different systems of calculations, there's so many different charts in Vedic astrology. I can't even personally imagine doing astrology without the D9, without the D10. Those are really important charts for me in my practice, and Western astrology just does not have that. Okay, because there's less information in Western astrology. Vedic astrology is like an endless library of information that we can go deeper and deeper into. All right, so that's really, really important. Okay, now another important difference between Vedic astrology and Western astrology is in Vedic astrology, most of us are using the Sidereal System. Sidereal means true to the stars. So the sidereal system of calculating where everything is at is based on how the ecliptic has shifted over time. And we can look up and see that a certain sign is actually in that placement now. Based on that true sidereal placement, tropical calculations are going by the seasons. Sidereal calculations are going by where the placement of the stars is at currently, based on that shift of the movement of the ecliptic over time. So we have different calculations of the chart, different calculations of everything when you're moving over to the sidereal system. All right, and another big difference between sidereal Vedic astrology and Western tropical astrology is Vedic astrology is using the nakshatras, so the 27 lunar mansions. Think about Western astrology when they say everyone born under this sign has these characteristics. In Vedic astrology, we actually split up the sign into different portions of the zodiac. So someone born under the same sign can actually still exist under a different nakshatra, which is going to give us a lot more information into someone's life story and their energy. As opposed to just saying this one sign is like this, it is split up into different degree portions of the zodiac. All right, and each nakshatra is ruled by a different planet, or ruled by Rahu and Ketu. So it's very different in the sense that one sign is still split up into different degree portions of the zodiac, and then we get an entirely different energy about it. For example, I'm a Gemini Lagna or ascendant, and my ascendant is Ardra, right? And Ardra is a very specific portion of the Gemini sign that has a whole different meaning than if someone was born in Punarvasu or a different, part of that nakshatra. All right. So that's really, really important. We have the 27 lunar mansions or nakshatras, which hold a whole different sort of mythology and has a whole other meaning to it as well, too. Okay? That's like a huge aspect of Vedic astrology that is so, so important. Now, another important difference is that Vedic astrology is a lunar-based system, meaning it is ruled by the moon. And you'll often find in Vedic astrology, the most important placement is your moon sign nakshatra, while Western tropical astrology is focused on the sun or the solar-based energy. Vedic astrology is going by the placement of the moon. All right. Which I find to be very, very accurate to really analyze someone's moon sign, nakshatra, house placement. It's so important, and it's really, really vital to someone's energy in this lifetime. All right. Now, another major difference of Vedic astrology is we see planets that sit in the same sign, in the same house as a conjunction. So there's also different aspects in Vedic astrology. We have different ways of viewing the aspects. We don't see them as like trines or squares. Yes, you can count around and still see the squares, still see the trines, but we have special aspects in Vedic astrology that is different than the Western astrology aspects. So for example, if Jupiter is with the moon and they're in the 8th house together in the sign of Pisces, that's a conjunction. It doesn't matter the degrees. It is a conjunction no matter what. All right. And funny story on this, like I said earlier, I know that I've done Vedic astrology in past lives because it just came to me intuitively. I used to practice Western astrology, right? And I remember one time I was talking to this guy who was a tropical Western astrologer. We were just friends, whatever. He was reading my chart. And this is before I really studied Vedic astrology in depth. He was reading my chart and he's like, oh, you have Venus and Mars and Leo. And I was like, yeah, it's a Venus-Mars conjunction. And he was like, I wouldn't call it a conjunction because there's about a 13, 14 degree orb between the two planets. And I was like, yeah, but that's how I read astrology. I still read it as a conjunction, which is crazy because that's literally one of the aspects of Vedic astrology that is truly a rule of Vedic astrology that somehow I just knew that, and that's how I read Western astrology charts. I would just read two planets together as a conjunction despite the degree orb. And so I was talking to this Western astrologer, and he's like, no, it's not a conjunction. And I'm like, yeah, it is a conjunction. That's how I read it. Which is legitimately a true aspect of Vedic astrology. So I'm telling you guys, I've done this in past lives. So there's different aspects we use as well too. We have special aspects of Rahu and Ketu, special aspects of Saturn. Mars creates special aspects. There's completely different aspects and rules of the planetary aspects in Vedic astrology that's different than Western astrology. The conjunctions are different. The aspects are different. We don't see it as squares. Whole different understanding of planetary aspects, okay? And it will give us so much more in-depth information with these planetary aspects. It's really mind-boggling when you truly learn the aspects of Vedic astrology. There's nothing more true or more accurate than those special aspects that planets make. Saturn's 3rd aspect, Saturn's 10th aspect, Jupiter's 5th aspect, Jupiter's 9th aspect, Ketu and Rahu, 5th aspect, 9th aspect. It's so accurate. It's so accurate. Okay, so we have different planetary aspects, and we see two planets in a sign together as a conjunction no matter the orb of degree, which is something I've always done in my Western astrological practice without knowing anything about Vedic astrology at the time, okay? Strange, isn't it? All right, so that's another huge difference between the two systems of Western astrology versus Vedic astrology. Now, another huge difference of Vedic astrology is we have different karakas. So there's this Gemini astrology, which is basically dividing all the different degrees of the chart into highest degree, lowest degree, different degree points, and it will give us the Atmakaraka, which is the sole purpose, and it will give us the Dharkaraka, which is the spouse. And these are really important points in Vedic astrology. So the highest degree planet and the lowest degree planet, which is an aspect of Gemini astrology. There's also something called the Bhrigu Bindu point in Vedic astrology, which is a sort of fated point in the chart that's going to give us a lot of information into someone's destiny and their fate in this lifetime as well too. All right, now difference is in Vedic astrology, we have what is called the Dasha System. Now, my actual favorite aspect of astrology is the Dasha System, okay? Changed my entire life, changed my entire view of astrology when I understood that I have been running a Rahu Dasha since I was 13 years old. Let me tell y'all. I went to many Western astrologers when I was younger, right? Because I was just so interested in all things astrological. It was really just what I've always been interested in. So I went to many different Western astrologers, and I would go to professional ones who were really, some of the top Western astrologers. And they would give me some great insights, some great information, some really cool transit information that was real and it was accurate. Again, I have nothing against Western astrology. I'm just speaking on my personal experience from both systems. But no one ever could tell me why I was going through the craziest experience ever, like the Rahu Dasha, which I have a video on. If you guys want to go watch it, we have this Rahu Dasha video up on my channel that I had been running since I was 13, right? Like, my life was so crazy when I started the Rahu Dasha, and nobody had any sort of answers for me in Western astrology. Like, everyone was like, oh, you're going through the Jupiter return, this is transiting your blah, blah, blah house. And I was like, okay, there's accurate aspects of that, but it never felt like it spoke to the truth of my experience, which was very tumultuous, which was like this crazy experience. I was going through a Rahu Dasha, I was going through Sati Sati, which is also another aspect that is specific to Vedic astrology, is the Sati Sati experience, which I find to be so accurate. Someone needs to know when they're going through Sati Sati. And no one had this explanation for me of like why my life was so crazy for so long, right? I was in the Rahu Dasha, I was starting Sati Sati, it was wild, and I went to this Western astrologer and she's just, this is a time period of this, and it was somewhat accurate, but it wasn't super in-depth. And then I get into Vedic astrology and I'm like, this is what I'm going through. I'm going through this crazy Rahu Dasha, right? So to me, the Dasha sequence is my favorite part of astrology, actually, because it gave me so much validation and so much understanding of my life experience. Starting a Rahu Dasha at 13 years old, talk about ups and downs, talk about highs and lows, talk about all the things that Rahu is going to bring into your life that no Western astrologer ever picked up on, right? Because they don't use the Dasha system, okay? So I find the Dasha system in Vedic astrology to be the thing that I use the most in prediction and find the most accurate prediction from. All right, so we have the Dasha system, which is basically setting up someone's whole entire life experience based on their moon sign nakshatra. It creates this system of a Dasha sequence, where it'd be like Jupiter Dasha, and then this Dasha based on someone's moon sign nakshatra. Now, another aspect of Vedic astrology that is different is the yogas. So yoga means union. All right, so the word yoga just translates to union. So it means that in Vedic astrology, we have these specific yogas or union of planets that is having this whole meaning that it's taking on. All right. For example, I have a Chandra Mangal yoga. I have the moon opposite Mars. That's a specific yoga that means someone goes towards business. Okay. And since I was younger, I would tell people like, I'm going to start a business. When I was like 13 years old, I was out at the lemonade stand and I was like, yeah, I'm going to make all this money at this lemonade stand. So that's my Chandra Mangal yoga, which is a business yoga. All right. Which Western astrology could never pick up on because they don't have the yogas. All right. Another example, the Mahaprasha yogas of 5 great men, right? The Jupiter Hamsa yoga, which I have. No one ever picked up on that in Western astrology, but my Jupiter is so strong in Vedic astrology and my whole life is about Jupiter. I've been about Jupiter my whole entire life. Okay. Something that Western astrology could never get to because they don't have that level of access of information. All right, so the yogas, which means union of planets, is so important in Vedic astrology. Do I use every single yoga? No. I use what works in Vedic astrology and I leave what does not work because I am a practicing Vedic astrologer, right? I'm not doing like theoretical texts. I'm not writing about the ancient texts of Vedic astrology. Yes, I find those sacred and divine and beautiful, but we're living in this modern world where like I have to be an accurate astrologer. I can't just be talking about someone killing a pregnant snake in a past life. That's not really going to get me the most accurate information. So as a practicing astrologer, I use the yogas that work and I leave what doesn't. And the Mahaprasha yogas really, really work. The Chandramangal yoga really works. Parivartan yoga really, really works. And sometimes the Dana yogas, the wealth producing yogas, Lakshmi yoga really does work. If someone has a Lakshmi yoga, they're going to create wealth. I've seen it so many times. All right. So there are yogas that are so powerful in Vedic astrology that you don't want to miss it. Again, if someone missed the fact that I have a Chandramangal yoga, if someone missed the fact that I have a Jupiter Hamsa yoga, they're missing about 25% of my entire life story by not understanding those yogas in my charts. And that's why it's so powerful. That's why it's so important, because the yogas will give you information that you need to understand in someone's Vedic astrological chart to understand their true life story and actually predict accurate things about their life story and life experience. Not their personality. Chandramangal yoga, moon conjunct Mars or opposite Mars, Western astrology would say you're feisty and you might argue with people a lot. Yeah, there's an aspect of that can be true, but it's a business yoga in Vedic astrology. So then we take it to the Vedic system and someone would have told me, oh, you should go into business. You're going to start your own business. That's way more useful and way more accurate than telling me I have a feisty Mars-Moon opposition. Do you guys see what I'm saying? Like, it's a different level of prediction and a different level of information and a different level of analysis. It's really important, really important. All right, now another aspect of Vedic astrology that is really important to understand is a lot of Vedic astrologers are very pragmatic, they're very logical, they have these scientific sort of minds, and sometimes Western astrology and Western astrologers take astrology to a little bit more of, I want to say, a woo place. Not all. I know many amazing Western astrologers who don't do it that way, but Vedic astrologers are traditionally very pragmatic, very logical, very straight to the point. I get a lot of clients that come to me from Vedic astrologers from India, and they'll say, I went to this Vedic astrologer, and he would just say, you're not getting married. So it can be very like that when it's too extreme. But Vedic astrologers are just very pragmatic in their approach to astrology because it's called the science of light. It's truly a science, right? Learning Vedic astrology is like learning one of the most complex scientific equations you've ever learned. Not to scare you guys off from studying Vedic astrology, but it is a complex sort of mathematical scientific system of astrology. You have to have a mind that is going to be able to grasp more pragmatic, logical concepts, because it is that way. Actually, it's more that way than the mystical woo sort of way. Vedic astrology is very pragmatic, it's very logical, it's very scientific, and it's very mathematic in its approach to astrology. So a lot of Vedic astrologers are that way in the way that they do astrology. It's more so an equation. Like, it's more so, okay, you have Rahu in this house. Rahu means this house means this. We're plugging in that energy into this house, looking at the aspects of the planet. It's mathematical and scientific in that way. All right, so a lot of Vedic astrologers are very practical, they're very pragmatic, they're very logical, this is just what it is. As someone who, I'm very sensitive, I don't like to hurt people's feelings. So for me, the way that I do Vedic astrology, I am very sensitive and I try to be very empathic with the messages I'm giving clients. But I also will be very truthful and very honest about what I see. I'm not going to make something up. It's not going to be airy-fairy, because Vedic astrology is very truthful and it is very much a pragmatic system of astrology. All right, so that's a huge difference. Not all Western astrologers, we're not generalizing, but a lot of Western astrology and astrologers can be a little bit more woo-woo or a little bit more airy-fairy at times in their practice, and Vedic astrology just isn't that way. It's never been that way. It's very based in logic and just like, how are we getting these results? How are we getting these predictions? It's very mathematical and very scientific in that way. All right. Another huge aspect of Vedic astrology is going to be the difference between Rahu and Ketu versus the North Node and the South Node. So Western astrology, there's the belief of the South Node, which is where we've been, our past lives, and the North Node is going to be where we're going, where our soul is trying to go. So in Vedic astrology, we call it Rahu and Ketu. And there's a whole mythology behind Rahu. There's a whole mythology behind Ketu. And there's entirely different meanings of what Rahu and Ketu will show in the charts, what they will show in transit, what they will show in the Dasha sequence, Dasha time periods, and what they will show when they are like on someone's ascendant or in some conjunct someone's personal planets. There's a whole different mythology and so much depth to Rahu and Ketu. Okay, so that's an entirely different aspect of Vedic astrology. We're constantly trying to understand, what is Rahu going to do? What is Ketu going to do? Because they are these elusive energies in Vedic astrology. It's not just about your past life and your future life. It's really complex. It's really deep. It's really seeped in mythology. And you have to really study Rahu and Ketu as a Vedic astrologer. You have to really try to get the essence of it, because it can be so difficult to grasp as a concept. All right, but when you start understanding the energies of Rahu and Ketu, I can look at someone and say, oh, they have Rahu on their ascendant. I can say, oh, they have Ketu on their ascendant, because I understand the energies that these shadowy energies are producing in astrology. So we get this whole like beautiful mythology of Rahu and Ketu that's going to add so much to the astrological practice, as opposed to just past life, future life, where you've been, where you're trying to go. It's not that simplistic. It's really deep. And another really important aspect of the difference between Vedic astrology and Western is Vedic astrology is bringing in a whole different cultural aspect. There's a lot of Sanskrit, there's a lot of different terminology that you have to learn as a Vedic astrologer. You have to learn the four aims of life. You have to understand certain aspects of the culture to properly understand different aspects of Vedic astrology. It's really important. You have to study different aspects of the cultural difference to know why certain things are the way they are. So for example, why is the fourth house this watery house? Oh, because it's moksha, because it's spiritual liberation, right? There's a lot more depth. There's a lot more meaning that we can access through cultural differences between Vedic and Western astrology as well too. So it's really important to know that it is seeped in this ancient culture and this beautiful ancient tradition that we have to learn as well too while doing Vedic astrology. All right, so overall, as someone who studied Western tropical astrology for so much of my life, when I shifted over to Vedic Sidereal Astrology, my whole understanding of astrology changed. My whole understanding of reality essentially changed, because I used to go towards that Western viewpoint of like, oh, we can understand someone's personality and it's so simple and it's in a box and all these things. Where doing Vedic astrology, it changed my whole perspective of, oh, I actually understand why I'm here. Oh, I actually understand why I've had all these weird Ketu-like experiences in my 10th house of career. Oh, I actually understand that I've been running a Rahu Dasha since I was 13. Oh, I actually understand that I was going through Sati Sati. Like, Vedic Sidereal Astrology brought me profound knowledge. Western tropical astrology brought me more surface level knowledge. So like through Western tropical astrology, I could be like, oh, I'm a Libra, I'm creative and I'm flighty and I'm airy, and which it's just so silly, right? It's kind of silly. And then you shift over to Vedic astrology and it's, oh, I have a Jupiter Hamsa yoga. I'm going to be Jupiter my whole life, which I am. Oh, I have a Chandra Mangal yoga. I'm meant to go towards business. Oh, I have Ketu in the 10th house. I'm meant to have a mystical, spiritual career. And if I don't, things are really weird. And those are themes and aspects of my life that are so deeply embedded in my whole life experience that you just can't pick up on in Western astrology because they don't have that level of information. And those are themes of my life that Western astrologers would never pick up on. They just wouldn't. So to me, Vedic astrology is like actually understanding why we're here, our purpose, our karma, our dharma, how to step into our power, how to get out of cycles, how to really embody our true path and our true purpose in this lifetime. Vedic astrology changed my whole entire life. And again, I never did Western astrology as a professional astrologer because I didn't believe in it enough to do it professionally. That's actually the truth. Because for me, like, I don't want to do anything if I don't fully believe in it. And so for me, Western astrology, I liked it. It was always really an interest of mine. I loved it. It was so fun. You know, it was eye-opening in certain aspects of my psychology and like my psyche and my personality. But when I started studying Vedic astrology, it was like, oh, I actually understand why astrology was so deeply embedded in culture in ancient times and why people actually went to astrologers to do everything, essentially. They used to always go to astrologers. They wouldn't do anything without an astrologer back in the ancient times. It made me understand like how powerful Vedic astrology is and why it's so potent, why it's so powerful, because there's so much depth, there's so much knowledge, there's so much self-realization that came for me through Vedic astrology, and it really changed my whole life and my whole perspective on astrology, but also on reality as well too. All right, and it's also just in someone's purpose to study Vedic astrology or it's not, which is a belief that I truly hold. I don't think every single person is meant to study Vedic astrology because it is such a deeply complex study that you really have to dedicate yourself to. And it's not for everyone. I've met a lot of people who they're like, that's cool, Vedic astrology is so accurate, I love how accurate it is, but I can't go to that place with astrology. It's too deep, it's too much study. And that's totally fine. It's not in everyone's path, but if it is in your path and it is in your calling, I always say you don't find Vedic astrology, it finds you, which is what happened to me. A little backstory, I grew up next door to a professional Vedic astrologer. What an odd coincidence, right? 2 doors down is this professional Vedic astrologer as I'm growing up. Another weird coincidence is people just used to come up to me and they'd be like, have you ever heard of Vedic astrology? One time I was in this random shop in New York and me and my friend were just like buying some items like candles or incense or whatever. And the worker there starts talking to us and he looks at me and he's like, you know what? And it was this deep look that felt like, oh, I'm about to have some wisdom bestowed upon me. And he looks at me deeply into my eyes and he goes, you know what? The most accurate astrology reading I've ever gotten was a Vedic astrology reading. And then he just looks away. And I'm like, oh, okay, got it, universe, got it. And also, I used to think in my mind, first of all, I used to think, oh, I feel like I actually have Venus conjunct Mars in Cancer, not in Leo. I would just think these things randomly. And then I would pull up my Vedic astrological chart. I would have Venus conjunct Mars in Cancer, not Leo. Okay. I used to also think in my mind, I would have this like weird thought form when I was doing Western astrology that would come to me where I'd be like, this is missing information. I would think in my mind, Western astrology is missing information. Something is missing. They're missing something. And then I met a Vedic astrologer who told me, oh, did you know that Western astrology is missing information because of the burning of Alexandria? I used to also see like what would look like a Vedic chart to me. In my mind, I'd be like, I think that's what astrology should look like. And then I pulled up a Vedic astrological chart and I was like, oh, this is the astrology I've always seen. It's either in your calling, it's either in your purpose, or it's not. For me, it was like clear as day that I was meant to be a Vedic astrologer. I got pushed into it in so many different directions. I was always hearing about Vedic astrology. I grew up next door to a Vedic astrologer. It was truly meant for me. I have the kind of Vedic astrological chart where it's really this or nothing. For me in this lifetime, this is really my career and what I'm meant to do. So it's also a calling or it's not a calling for everyone. But I will say, as someone who has studied and really immersed myself in both systems of astrology, Vedic Sidereal Astrology is the one you want to go towards if you really want to go into deep, complex, accurate, predictive astrology. And I don't just mean accurate predictive as in like, when is someone going to get married? When is someone going to get a new job? But predictive as in knowing someone's true life story and predicting what has happened to them and predicting their career and predicting relationship dynamics and predicting through the Dasha system, like not just predicting future events, but really predicting how someone's life has actually gone, right? Because Western astrology could never tell me my career, right? It could never tell me business. Why am I interested in business? You just couldn't see those things in the Western chart. And it's very obvious in the Vedic chart once you learn how to properly read it and study it. All right. So I know this was a really long video, but it's really important for people to understand how vastly different Western astrology is, Vedic astrology. They're two completely different systems of astrology, and I have studied both. And truly, Vedic astrology is the system that I will scream from the rooftops. Everyone should study Vedic. No, only if you feel called to it. But it's really a beautiful, deep, sacred system of astrology. It's so deep, it's so sacred, and there's a reason my business is called Sacred Vedic Astrology, because I take it very seriously, right? Because I do see a lot of everyone's an astrologer now. Everyone on TikTok is an astrologer, right? But no one learns Vedic astrology without a guru, a guide, and a teacher. Don't even try. That's my best advice. Don't even try to learn Vedic astrology without a teacher or a guide, because it's not going to happen. It's such a deeply complex system of astrology, and it is something that has to be taken very seriously if you are going to go that route and really study it in the true way as well too. All right, so I hope this was helpful. There's so many aspects of how these systems are so different, but I feel like I can talk about this from such a personal place because I have studied both systems. I used to love Western astrology, but it did not give me the answers I needed. It didn't truly help my life path out. I didn't feel like I got all the clarity I needed. You know, Vedic astrology, it's like, oh my God, Rahu Dasha, Sati Sati. Those were major things going on in Vedic astrology that Western astrologers could not pick up on, could not give me any sort of guidance about, because it's just not in the system, right? It's not their fault. It's just not there in the system to work with. All right, I'm going to let my Gemini ascendant stop rambling. And I really hope this video was helpful and useful, and I am such an advocate for at least looking a little bit into Vedic astrology if you are a Western astrologer. Get a book or two. I recommend any book by James Braha. I truly think he is like the most amazing Vedic astrologer I've ever met. Such an amazing, logical, practical Vedic astrologer who really just uses what works and leaves what doesn't. He's amazing. So if you want to slowly get into Vedic astrology, pick up a book by James Braha, and he is just such a great, great Vedic astrologer. So again, I hope you guys enjoyed, and we will talk soon. Sending all the love. Bye, guys.